this is my brand new 911S, and I'm selling it. A while ago, you may have seen a video that I did in regards to my BMW M4. It was a manual transmission car, it was a G82, and at the time I had mentioned it's actually the shortest I've ever owned a vehicle ever, 6 months. And in that video I had mentioned that I ordered a 911. I ordered the car in January, picked it up May 1st or May 2nd. It was a relatively quick build, and I'm selling it. So why is a very, very interesting question, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with this car. In fact, it is one of the best cars anybody can possibly buy. It's one of the best sports cars you can buy. And yet, why am I selling it? I have my reasons, but before we get into that, let me go over just a few things with this car. This is a 911S, it's a manual, so that's a 7-speed manual. It's got the aero kit, which has a different front bumper, and it's got this really, really beautiful, gorgeous wing on the back. It's got a different rear bumper as well. I believe the side skirts are ever so slightly different. It's got the gold wheels. But unfortunately, what it doesn't have is it's missing something for me. The reason why I bought a 911S is because I thought I became a Porsche guy. Yes, I'm a Porsche guy now. I drove a GT3 for a month, and that was the old Adam LZ, Matt Armstrong Tavares car that I did a review on in the past as well. And that car really just like sunk its teeth into me, and I said I need a 911. And I couldn't really justify paying $200,000+ for a GT3, so I figured I'd do the next best thing, or at least I thought I was doing the next best thing, and that was to spec a car exactly like this, guards red, gold wheels, Mojave interior, red seat belts, red dials, and get it with a stick. Unfortunately, I was a little bit mistaken. I think my expectations were a little too high. Having said that, I really have to say that this car is virtually perfect. This is, again, one of the best cars you can buy in this category, but me being a stickler for precision, agility, sound, and that kind of is what rounds out emotion for me in a sports car, that this car doesn't exactly have that. It handles pretty well, but it's not quite razor sharp like a GT3, and again, that's on me for expecting that. And then furthermore, it's a 3-liter flat 6, and so it doesn't sound good because it is turbocharged. And no matter what you do to this car, it will not sound good. And I've watched hours and hours of video. Well, I came to the conclusion that I think I'm going to sell it, and what I'll sell it for remains to be seen. We'll get to that in the later part of the video. I am over the moon. I cannot believe this is my car. But in the meantime, I do want to take you for a little ride in what I think is A, such a gorgeous, gorgeous car, and B, such an enjoyable drive if you're not a psychopath who wants to be tortured by his vehicles. So if you are, let's say, someone like a doctor or a lawyer, you are a professional, unlike myself, you would absolutely love owning one of these. Before we start the drive, I do want to point out one of the coolest features about this car is that even though this right here is a manual gearbox, it's actually a PDK underneath. So Porsche uses the exact same transmission that they do in the PDKs, but just really different linkages and cables that operate this. So underneath here is a oddly spaced and configured PDK gearbox. And that said, now it's really time to go drive in this car. So the interesting thing about the 911, say when you want the most hard-nosed 911 experience, you have to go for a GT3, you have to go for an RS car. And so if you are coming from the supercar world where, you know, like myself, I have a McLaren, you get very used to that kind of experience. And if you want to jump into something like a 911 and you get a T or a base or an S like this one or a GTS, you might find yourself a little bored. And that is not a knock on the car. If you're looking for a daily driver, this is the perfect daily driver. If you're looking to have some excitement on your daily drive, this might not suit your needs. The car is just too good. It's perfect at everything it does. I mean, literally, just the steering is wonderful. The handling is a bit soft for my liking, and even if you hit the PASM, which this car has, the road gets bumpier, but it doesn't feel like the car improves a whole lot. I think I expected a GT3 Lite, and what I got was a bit more Aston Martin. It's not a knock on the car, I just think it's a knock on my own stupid expectations. As one and only sports car to live with, this is the perfect car. And I think it's a shame that in order for me to have a really true Porsche experience, or be, you know, just in love with the car, I have to jump into something that's $50,000 more. And I really was hoping to be absolutely obsessed with this car. The clutch is probably the weakest point on this car, and I say that because it lacks feel. There is really not a whole lot of feel to the clutch. It's just very soft, very mushy. Surprisingly enough, the M4, the G82 car that I had right prior to this, had a way better feeling clutch. It was firmer. You knew exactly where the catch point was, or where the slip point was. You knew exactly how it would engage from a stoplight. And that's another little thing about this car, is that the flywheel clutch combo is very lightweight. And so what ends up happening is there's not a whole lot of torque being produced below 1,000 RPM. So the car is very hesitant to roll off with just the clutch. It requires revs, otherwise high likelihood you will stall this car. Very similar to the GT3, even more so now on the new ST, which is the really hard-nosed GT3 Touring. There's a lot of intricacy here. Now, the other thing with the gearbox is that, yes, it does do downshift rev matching, but it does not do upshift rev matching, which the GT3, the M4, the 370Z, any manual transmission car that has rev matching, those cars do both up and down. This one does not. But that's okay, because this car can be shifted really quickly without bucking. So it's not a problem at all if you are a fairly experienced manual transmission driver. Once you learn, hey, the 1-2 shift on this car needs to be performed pretty quickly, it won't buck, which was the complete opposite experience I had with the M4, where the 1-2 shift had to be done very slowly on the BMW, because it has a lot of rev hang. This car does not have any rev hang, virtually none. But it handles fairly well, but not as well, again, as I would have hoped. A bit too much body roll. Like I said, I've got PASM active. It's in the sportiest settings. Boring. And I was hoping to have 85–90% of the experience of a GT3 with the PASM, but just don't quite get that out of this car. Yes, I can modify the suspension. I can do an HAS kit or the height adjustable kit. I can do all sorts of other stuff, but at that point, I'm modifying the car. I might as well just jump into a GT3 if I'm spending thousands and thousands of dollars on extra bits and pieces. The one thing I specifically remember, as soon as I drove the car off the lot, and I'm on the highway driving about 80 miles from my local Porsche dealer, which, by the way, Porsche Melbourne, amazing people. Thank you for this car. But driving home 80 miles or so, I remember the car feeling a little floaty on the highway. The tire pressure was a little bit too high, which is a factory setting of like 49 from the factory. It was absurd. They have two settings. So I lowered it to the lower setting, which was, I believe, 35 front, 42 rear. And I did that, and still did not have the confidence on the highway that I thought I would, having with the GT3 or other cars for that matter. It just felt a little too floaty. The steering response, while really good, if you would flick the car left and right suddenly, there was two separate motions happening. The car didn't feel like one cohesive unit. It felt like two different things. The front responded and then the rear responded, and it would snap back, and it's a GT car. This is a GT car. This is not a true sports car. It doesn't, I want it to kick my ass. That's what I want this car to do, and I want to kick its ass. But it doesn't want to be driven that way. It requires quite a bit of modification. The valves, for example, even the standard exhaust like this car, has a valve back there, but through software, the valve is locked. So you can buy a $600 valve controller, you can tune this car with like an M Engineering or something along those lines, and you can unlock the valve. But why? Why would they just, you know, do that? You have to buy the sport exhaust in order to have a little bit more sound, and even then on the sport exhaust, the valve only opens about 20%. It's so bizarre, the decisions that they make. If you want to know about the interior and all this other stuff, if you want to know about the tech in the car, just watch a GT3 video. A lot of that's very similar. It's a wonderful, wonderful screen, wonderful response times. Everything here is really, really good, very high end. But at the same time, I also don't feel like this is a $150,000 interior. And granted, this car, the 992.1, started at the time at about $123,000, if I recall correctly. So does it feel like a $120,000 interior? Yes and no. It's kind of hard to just justify every little thing here. Some of these switch gears kind of look like Audi switch gear, and but I do like the toggles, just like the GT3, and the AC controls and all this other little stuff. It's unique. It feels a little racier, a little more inspired. You can go crazy on options with this car, honestly, you really could. But I full well acknowledge that I am probably in a very, very small minority of people that wants a hard-nosed car for this kind of money. In fact, there's a reason why these 911s, they sell so well, and why they hold their value so well. It's because they don't beat you up. And I think I have a bit of a problem where I want my car to treat me like shit. And I think that's why I drive a McLaren. And I think that's why the next car will be what it will be. But at the same time, this car gets high remarks all around. The only thing I'm basically complaining about is that this car lacks emotion. I'm sad to see this car go, but it's just not what I expected, not what I wanted from a $150,000 car. And so on that note, we're gonna cut to the new purchase. So if a 911S with a manual transmission that's guards red, with a beautiful aero kit, if that's not passion, then what is? So I thought about this, and I think I finally figured it out. It's gotta be Italian. It's gotta be yellow, and has to have a naturally aspirated V8 revving to 9,000 RPM. I am living out my childhood dream. Posters on the wall, all that jazz. Now, granted, I do also have a McLaren, and that was another dream, but McLarens were not my childhood because McLaren really didn't exist as a fully functioning company up until 2011 or 10 or so, something like that. But this is the stuff that dreams are literally made out of. This is my 2010 Ferrari 458 Italia, and I am over the moon. I cannot believe this is my car. So yes, the 911 is gone. I got the most incredible deal humanly imaginable on a really clean 2010 low mileage. It only has 14,000 miles. It's been driven less than 1,000 miles a year, which is kind of sad. I intend to drive this car. It is a low mileage car. It's got a clean Carfax, no accidents, nothing funny on it. I paid $180 for the car. Yes, $180. I sold my 911S for $150, which was my original sticker price on the car. So I lost zero on the 911, and that's the great thing about Porsches is they don't depreciate. Similarly to a car like this, which is only on the uphill at the moment. 458s are appreciating fairly rapidly. They kind of stabled out a little bit during 2023, and this was my chance to jump into my all-time favorite Ferrari. It was really between this or 430, but I could not pass this up when the opportunity presented itself. So here it is, a Giallo Modena 458 Italia in all its glory, mid-engined. Oh my God, this thing sounds even factory. It sounds so good, especially once the valves open up. We will delete the valves. We're gonna block them because this just sings. And because it's a 2010, it actually also has pops and bangs, as the kids want to call it, but that's natural to the car. 2010, 2011, they did away with that in 2012, probably for some kind of noise regulations purposes, but yeah, these 2010s and 11s, they actually sound better than the later 12, 13, 14 cars. And I mean, honestly, every time I look at this thing in this setting with the farmlands back here with these trees, and it just looks so stunning. But it's not perfect, and I'm going to go over all the things that are wrong with it, but I'm going to do that in a separate video. This is just an introduction. If you have a 911, trade it in for one of these. Figure out a way. I don't know what you have to do, but trade it in for one of these, because so far I have been in absolute paradise with this car. So let's take a moment now, jump in the car, and see just how different this compares to a 911S for kind of similar money. Let's take it out for a drive. So what are the immediate differences between a Ferrari and a Porsche? Well, for starters, that howl, it's intoxicating. You just want to drive the car in 2 gears. I mean, that's 6,000 RPM, and it sounds like that. It's freaking nuts. We'll drop it down for 3,000, third gear, second gear. It's not the fastest car in the world, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, I only hit about 65 there, but who cares when it sounds like that? And it's so visceral. It's such a raw feeling to drive something, and you feel so connected to it. On top of that, yes, the 911 had a manual. Yes, there's a sense of connection there, but this DCT is amazing. It's so good. And especially because actually feels a little bit old school, the DCT. It's not as, how do I put it? The Lamborghini DCT almost feels a little CVT-ish, and I know people are going to hate me for saying this, but it changes gears so fast you don't even get the sensation of something happening with the gearbox. But this is, you know, an old get-rag transmission, and it's 15 years old, and God, it just, every gear change you feel something just through your core. Sense of emotion, the pageantry, the theater, that's what makes a six-figure car worth its salt. You know, the 911 was so wonderful, so clean, but it wasn't worth $150,000. Not to me, it wasn't. For $180,000, you cannot go wrong trying to find a good 458, clean it up, and you're in heaven every single time you turn this key. Actually, you have to turn it and then hit the start button, which is pretty funny and a little confusing sometimes when you're going between 3 or 4 different cars. But nonetheless, I digress. I should have bought this car from the start. One of the interesting things about this car is that despite it being a Ferrari, and despite the suspension technology not being that advanced, it's actually still a very compliant car. I've got it set to race. I don't have the the bumpy road button enabled, which will actually really soften up the suspension quite a bit and make things a little bit more floaty. So that is, well, at the end of the day, I will say that this does handle better than the 911. And the reason why is because the steering response is extremely good, and it just feels a little bit more balanced overall. I had the opportunity to do a few parade laps in this car, drive it a little bit around a track, and my oh my, was it a happy car on the track. The 911, you could hustle, but I never felt connected to the 911. This, you really do. You feel the rear end of the car is very playful, likes to step out, but it's easy to catch, easy to manage. Even with the car in race or CT, I haven't tried it in CST yet, and I don't think I ever will because it's just not my skill level. but nonetheless, there's still a lot of feeling that goes on through the steering, the rear end. The differential is incredible. It's just the perfect dance partner, and I think I mentioned that with the 911, that car did not feel as engaging to drive fast. It just was missing that, and again, that's because it wasn't a GT3, and for $150,000, I just couldn't justify keeping that car any longer. I am meanwhile pretty obsessed with this car. So happy that this is my first Ferrari. I will cherish this moment for a long, long time. But it's not over yet. So we've got a few things to do to it. We got to bring this car up to spec, make it perfect. I don't want a perfect car, but I really want this to be as clean as it possibly can. And we'll go over some of those things in the future, because there's things that need to be fixed. And if you're considering buying a 911, make sure you buy a GT3, because that's really the one you want, especially if you're watching videos like this and you want something raw and fun and hard-nosed. You're going to be looking for a GT3, but if you're in GT3 price territory, why not buy this? For $220, $230, you can find a minter of a 458. Thank you for watching. See you next time.